I was sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee when Linda came downstairs wearing Edie's red wool coat, the one she'd had altered to fit her smaller frame. She moved differently now, purposeful, like she'd already left our marriage in her mind and was just collecting the physical pieces. The wood stove crackled behind me. Through the frosted window, I could see her designer luggage sitting by the front door, to me, the kind that cost more than a week's groceries. The tag read L. Hartwell. She'd already changed her name. James is picking me up at noon, she announced, pouring herself coffee she wouldn't finish. We're driving to New York together. I'm finally getting what this land is worth. A black Escalade idled in the driveway, diesel exhaust white against the frozen December air. The vanity plate read, Close R41. Pastor Holcomb's F-150 slowed past our driveway. I watched him through the window, watched him watch her leave. That's when I noticed the county deed folder on her nightstand. She'd forgotten to hide it. The morning after she left, I walked the property line with my coffee, same as I'd done every December morning for 40 years. The snow crunched under my boots. Wind whistled through the gap in the barn door I kept meaning to fix. But something was different. Fresh tire tracks led from the road to the surveyor's shed, the small outbuilding where my grandfather had kept his equipment. The tracks stopped at the property line, then turned around. Someone had been measuring, someone had been studying. I knelt down, touched the frozen earth where boot prints pressed into the snow beside the tracks. Size 11, maybe 12. Tread pattern from expensive hiking boots, not work boots, the kind of boots a real estate broker might wear when he wanted to look rugged. The cold seeped through my work gloves as I followed the tracks. They circled the northeast corner marker, the original surveyor's stone my grandfather had placed in 1947 when he homesteaded this land. Someone had scraped the snow off the stone, revealing the carved B for Brennan. I called Roy from the barn, my breath fogging in the cold air. Walt? My brother's voice carried the rasp of 73 winters. You sound strange. Can you come by today? Bring your old survey maps if you still have them. What's going on? I need to check something. The barn smelled like hay and old motor oil. Linda left yesterday. Silence on the line. Roy had never liked her, never said so directly, but I'd seen it in the way he shortened his visits after I remarried. I'll be there by lunch. The county records office smelled like old paper and floor wax. Nora Sims sat behind her desk surrounded by 40 years of accumulated tchotchkes, coffee mugs from every county fair since 1984, a ceramic cat collection, photographs of grandchildren I'd watched grow up in these yearly updates. Walt. She looked up over her reading glasses. I heard. I'm sorry. Small towns. Pastor Holcomb had seen Linda leave. By Sunday service, everyone would know. I need to see the property file for my farm, I said. Something's not right. Nora's chair creaked as she stood. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner. She pulled a file from the cabinet, set it on the counter between us, and opened it with the careful reverence she gave all official documents. There it was, a quitclaim deed, filed December 3rd, 12 days before Linda packed her suitcase. My hand went numb, holding the paper. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, same slant, same loops on the W&B, but I'd never signed this document. I'd never even seen it. Walter Brennan hereby transfers all interest in the property described below to Linda Mae Brennan, sole ownership, without warranty or claim. The legal description followed, 240 acres, Township 7 North, Range 4 East, parcels 12 and 13. December 3rd. Nora. My voice came out steady, quieter than I felt. Was I here that day? Did I file this? She pulled out the logbook, ran her finger down the entries. No, Linda came in alone. I remember because, she paused, glanced toward the door like someone might overhear. She seemed awful nervous, kept checking her phone. I asked if you were feeling all right, and she said you'd had a stomach bug, couldn't make it in. I'd been in the hospital, December 3rd, bypass surgery. I'd been unconscious, on a ventilator, while my wife filed paperwork to steal my grandfather's farm. Can I get a copy of this? Nora's hand trembled slightly as she fed the document into the copier. The machine hummed and clicked. She handed me the warm copy, and I noticed she'd made two, one for me, one she slipped into a separate folder. Walt, she whispered, I can testify you were hospitalized that day. I remember now. My sister works at County General. She mentioned seeing you in ICU. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside the window, December wind bent the bare trees. Thank you, Nora. I walked out into the cold with the copy folded in my coat pocket. The paper felt like it weighed 20 pounds. The ground was frozen solid, would be until April, maybe late March if we got lucky, and you can't survey property lines through frozen ground. You can't place boundary stakes. You can't prove a deed describes the wrong parcel when the earth itself won't let you measure. 4 months. I had to wait 4 months while they spent my grandfather's money. I picked up my mail at Clara's diner on Tuesday morning, same as I'd done every week since Edie passed. Clara had been holding mail for half the town since before I was born. The post office was 2 miles out, and her diner sat on Main Street where everyone stopped for breakfast anyway. The place smelled like coffee and bacon grease. The radiator hissed under the front window. Clara set my stack on the counter without a word, but her eyes held that particular softness people reserve for the newly abandoned. I sorted through the envelopes standing at the counter, electric bill, Tractor Supply catalog, then a thick envelope from First National Bank. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. The diner went quiet, not the natural quiet of a lull in conversation, but the deliberate quiet of people pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. I pulled out the statement. December 10th, equity line of credit disbursement, $780,000, payable to James and Linda Hartwell. The paper crinkled in my grip. $780,000, secured against my farm, against land my grandfather had broken his back clearing in 1947, land my father had nearly lost twice to bad crop years, land I'd paid off completely the year before Edie died. Walt, Clara's voice seemed to come from very far away. You okay? I wasn't okay. The floor felt unsteady under my boots. The bacon smell turned my stomach. They'd planned this, the quit-claim deed on December 3rd, the loan on December 10th, the smiling departure with designer luggage on December 15th. Every step choreographed, every detail considered, except I was supposed to never notice. I was supposed to be the old fool who let his young wife leave, who signed away his rights in a fog of heartbreak and confusion. Clara saw my hands shaking. By noon, the whole town would know. By Sunday service, I'd be the cautionary tale. Old men told each other, don't marry young widows, don't trust a pretty face, don't ever forget you're past your prime. I folded the statement and walked out into the December cold. The wind cut through my coat, road salt crunched under my boots. I called Attorney Morrison from my truck, engine running for heat, windows fogging with my breath. Walt, I heard about Linda. I'm sorry. Everyone was sorry. Sorry didn't change anything. I need legal advice. My wife filed a quit-claim deed transferring my farm to herself. I never signed it. Then she took out a $780,000 loan against the property. Silence on the line. Then, when was the deed filed? December 3rd. I was in the hospital. Bypass surgery. Do you have proof you were hospitalized? County general records, and the county clerk remembers Linda came in alone, nervous. More silence. Morrison was thinking, running through legal options the way good lawyers do. Here's the problem, Walt. A quit-claim deed transfers whatever interest the grantor has in the property. If Linda can prove you signed it, even if you were coerced or confused, it's legally binding. To challenge it, we'd need to prove forgery. It is forgery. And then we need to prove it. Handwriting analysis, timeline documentation, witness testimony, but here's the bigger problem. He paused. To definitively prove the deed is fraudulent, we'd need to show it describes property you don't own or describes boundaries incorrectly. That requires a current boundary survey. The cold seeped through the truck doors. My breath came out in white clouds. The ground's frozen, I said. Exactly. You can't do an accurate boundary survey until spring thaw. Late March at the earliest, more likely April. Until then, that deed stands, the loan stands, and unless you can prove forgery through other means, you're in a very difficult position. 4 months. 4 months of watching them spend my grandfather's money on a Manhattan condo while I waited for the earth to thaw enough to tell the truth. What should I do? Document everything. Get your medical records from December 3rd, talk to the county clerk officially, get her statement in writing. I'll file a motion to freeze any further equity withdrawals, but that loan money's already gone. And Walt, his voice dropped, be prepared for this to get ugly. If Linda and this James person planned this carefully, they'll have covered their tracks. This wasn't impulse. This was calculated. I hung up and sat in the truck, watching the December wind blow trash across the parking lot. The radio played low, some Christmas song about coming home. Calculated. She'd smiled when she left, smiled like she'd won something. December 3rd. She planned to steal my farm before she ever packed that suitcase. Roy's truck pulled into my driveway Thursday afternoon, exhaust white in the frozen air. He climbed out carrying something I hadn't seen in 20 years, our grandfather's theodolite case, the battered leather cracked and dark with age. The wind carried the smell of wood smoke from my chimney. Roy's boots crunched on the packed snow as he crossed the yard. At 73, he moved with the careful deliberation of a man who'd learned to respect his limits without surrendering to them. "Figured you might need this," he said, setting the case on my kitchen table. The brass latches clicked open with the same sound I remembered from childhood, watching Pa measure property lines, learning to read landscape the way other boys learned to read books. Inside, the 1952 theodolite sat nestled in green felt, brass fittings tarnished but intact. Beneath it, a leather journal, Pa's field notes from 1947, every boundary stone hand-drawn, every measurement recorded in his careful script. "We can't survey until April," I said, "ground's frozen." "I know that." Roy pulled out a chair, sat down with the journal. "But we can prepare now. Check the old measurements against that deed description. Find the discrepancies before we ever pound a stake." The radiator clanked. Coffee percolated on the stove. Roy opened the field notes to the first page, and I saw Pa's handwriting, strong and clear despite the decades. "Brennan Homestead, Section 12, Township 7 North, Range 4 East, commenced survey April 15th, 1947. Pa would want his tools used, Roy said quietly. He'd want this land defended. My throat tightened. I'd been so focused on the legal mechanics, the forgery, the timeline, that I'd forgotten what I was really fighting for. Not just property, not just money. 3 generations of Brennan men had worked this land. My grandfather had cleared it with a team of horses and a stubborn refusal to quit. My father had nearly lost it twice and held on through sheer will. And I'd promised Edie, when we scattered her ashes by the north boundary, that our daughter would inherit it someday. "I should have stopped you from marrying her," Roy said. You couldn't have. I saw it. The way she looked at the place, like she was appraising it." He turned a page in the journal. "Edie looked at it like home. Linda looked at it like inventory. The truth of it settled between us like snow. I was lonely," I said. "I know." We sat in silence, the kind of silence only brothers can share. Outside, a crow called. The wind rattled the window frame. "Let's get to work," Roy said. 3 days later, I stood in Nora's office, comparing 2 signatures under her desk lamp. Mine for my will, filed in 2019. Mine, supposedly, from the quitclaim deed, filed December 3rd. The signatures looked identical at first glance. Same slant, same pressure, same loops on the capital letters. But under the light, differences emerged. The W in Walter on the deed leaned slightly more forward. The tail on the N in Brennan extended too far. And the pressure, you could see it in how the pen had pressed into the paper, was too consistent, too deliberate. My real signature varied in pressure because I'd signed my name 10,000 times without thinking. This one had been copied carefully by someone trying very hard to get it right. "It's a good forgery," I said. "But it is a forgery." Nora positioned the 2 documents side by side, adjusted her lamp. "Look at the baseline. Your signature has a natural upward drift. You're right-handed, and most right-handed people do that unconsciously. This one is perfectly level. Someone traced it or used a light box." The fluorescent ceiling lights buzzed. Outside, afternoon shadows stretched long across the courthouse lawn. "Can you testify to this?" "I can testify you were hospitalized December 3rd. My sister Martha works in the ICU at County General. She mentioned seeing you that day, said you were unconscious, just out of surgery. And I can testify that Linda was nervous when she filed this, kept checking her phone like she was waiting for instructions." Nora photocopied both signatures, slipped one set into a folder marked with my name. The copier hummed and clicked, warm paper emerging into her hand. "Walt," she whispered, leaning closer, "I remember something else." She asked me about filing procedures 3 weeks before she came in with the deed. Asked specific questions about what documents were required, whether you both needed to be present, how long processing took. I thought she was just being thorough. 3 weeks before, late November, planning, calculating, researching. The paper felt warm in my hand as I folded it into my coat pocket. "Nora, you just gave me hope." She smiled, sad but certain. "You deserve better than what she did to you." The Facebook post appeared on Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Linda left. I don't use social media much, never saw the point, but my neighbor Eddie called at 7 a.m. to tell me I should look. I borrowed Sarah's login, my daughter helping me navigate to James Hartwell's page from 1,000 miles away via phone call. her voice tight with anger. There it was, a photograph of James and Linda on what looked like a Manhattan rooftop, city lights glittering behind them. Linda wore a dress I'd never seen, something expensive and black. James had his arm around her waist, smiling at the camera with the confident ease of a man who'd never faced consequences. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to leave toxic situations to find yourself. Linda is finally free from a controlling relationship. No one should have to live in fear, proud of her courage. #survivor support, #new beginnings." The post had 247 likes, 38 comments, all supportive. So brave. You both deserve happiness. Sending love and light. Linda had shared it to her own page with additional text. For years I walked on eggshells. Emotional abuse leaves scars you can't see. I'm healing now. I'm safe. Thank you all for your support. My hands went numb holding the phone. Dad? Sarah's voice cracked through the speaker. That's a lie. You never... I know. But half the town wouldn't know. Half the town would see that post and think, well, maybe there was more to the story. Maybe the old man wasn't as gentle as he seemed. Maybe she had good reason to leave, to take what she could, to protect herself. By Saturday afternoon, 3 people had canceled standing coffee dates. By Saturday evening, Clara's diner felt different when I walked in. Conversations pausing just a moment too long, eyes cutting away just a moment too quick. The smell of fried eggs and coffee couldn't mask the discomfort. Eddie sat at the counter, waved me over. "Don't listen to them," he muttered. "Anyone who knows you knows it's bull." But not everyone knew me. And even those who did, how many were wondering? How many were thinking about the young wife who left, the old husband who stayed, the age gap that had always made people whisper? By Sunday, half the town believed I'd driven her away. The other half just pitied me. First Methodist Church smelled like coffee and old hymnals. I sat in the Brennan family pew, 3rd row from the front on the right side, same spot my grandfather had claimed in 1948, and tried to focus on Pastor Holcomb's sermon. The organ hummed low beneath his words. Winter light filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across the worn floorboards. The radiator ticked and clinked in the corner. Then the door opened. The sound of it, that particular creak of old hinges, made half the congregation turn. I didn't need to turn. I could feel the shift in the room, the sudden tension like barometric pressure before a storm. Linda and James walked down the center aisle. She wore a cream-colored dress, tasteful and modest. He wore a suit that cost more than most people in this room made in a month. They moved together with the practiced ease of a couple who'd been together far longer than 2 weeks. They sat in my pew, not near it, not in the same row. In my pew, the Brennan family pew, 3rd row on the right side where 3 generations had worshipped, where Edie and I had sat every Sunday for 37 years, where my father had sat with my mother, where my grandfather had sat alone after Grandma passed, faithful until the day he died. Linda slid in first, James beside her. The wood creaked under their weight. She didn't look at me. Neither did he. They sat facing forward like they had every right to be there, like the name carved into the wooden armrest. Brennan, 1948, meant nothing. My chest tightened. The old bypass scar ached. Around me I could hear the whispers starting, soft as mice in walls. Pastor Holcomb faltered mid-sentence. His eyes found mine, asking a silent question. "Do you want me to intervene?" I shook my head slightly. I wouldn't leave. I wouldn't cause a scene. I would sit in my family's pew, the one they were trying to take, just like they'd taken everything else. And I would not move. The sermon ended. The final hymn rose around us. Amazing Grace, the notes familiar as breathing. Beside me, Linda sang along. Her voice was pretty. I'd forgotten that. Or maybe I'd never really listened. Then came fellowship hour. In the basement, the smell of weak coffee and store-bought cookies, the sound of folding chairs, scraping linoleum. I stood by the coffee urn, not drinking, just standing, because leaving felt too much like surrender. James approached Pastor Holcomb near the cookies table. Linda beside him, her hand on his arm. They spoke quietly, but in the acoustics of the church basement, quiet carried. "We wanted to let the community know," James said, his voice pitched for the dozen people within earshot. "Linda and I are engaged. We're planning a spring wedding in New York, but we hope to keep ties here. This is her home, after all." The room went silent. Even the coffee maker stopped gurgling. Linda smiled. Not the triumphant smile from the suitcase morning, but something softer, sadder, the smile of a survivor sharing her story. "I know this is difficult for some people, but I had to choose my happiness. I had to choose safety. And James has given me that. Safety." The word hung in the air like smoke. I felt eyes turning toward me, judging, weighing. wondering what kind of man I really was, what happened in that farmhouse when no one was watching, whether the quiet old widower had a darker side nobody knew about. My hands shook. I set down the coffee cup before I dropped it. Pastor Holcomb straightened. I saw something change in his face, some decision made. He set down his own cup and cleared his throat loud enough to cut through the murmuring. "James, Linda," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 58 years and 30 years in ministry. "I'm glad you're here. I've been meaning to speak with you." The room held its breath. "I saw you both at the county records office on November 30th, Pastor Holcomb continued. His tone was gentle but immovable, the voice he used for speaking truth that needed speaking. "Before any of this, before Walt's surgery, before the posts about abuse and safety, I saw you coming out together, laughing, carrying paperwork. I remember because I'd stopped by to file some church documents, and I thought it was odd, seeing Walt's wife with a man I didn't recognize looking quite familiar with each other." The silence deepened, cold and complete. "So when I hear about abuse and control and fear," Pastor Holcomb said quietly, "I find myself confused. Because what I saw that day looked like two people planning something together. Not a woman seeking safety, not a victim escaping, just two people with paperwork and secrets." Linda's face went pale. James's jaw tightened. "That's," James started. "I'm not making accusations," Pastor Holcomb interrupted, still gentle, still immovable. "I'm just sharing what I witnessed, because I believe truth matters, and timing matters, and when someone claims they're fleeing abuse. But I saw them weeks earlier planning something with another man. Well, that matters too." No one moved. The radiator ticked. Somewhere upstairs, a door closed. James took Linda's arm. "We don't need to stay here and be attacked." "No one's attacking you," Pastor Holcomb said. "I'm just telling the truth." They left. The door at the top of the basement stairs slammed hard enough to rattle the ceiling tiles. The whispers started immediately, but different whispers now. Questioning whispers, doubtful whispers. Pastor Holcomb crossed the room to me. "Walt, I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry." My throat was too tight to speak. I nodded. "The truth needs telling," he said, "even when it's uncomfortable." Especially then, I thought. But as I drove home, through the gray afternoon, past fields frozen and silent, I knew the damage was done. Half the town believed I was an abuser, the other half was confused. And even those who believed Pastor Holcomb, even those who sided with me, what could they do? What could anyone do? The ground was still frozen, the deed was still filed, the money was still gone. And I was still just an old man, waiting for spring, waiting for the earth to thaw enough to tell its own truth. 4 months. I'd been patient for 2 more to go. The cemetery sat on a low hill east of town, bare trees black against gray winter sky. I parked by the gate and walked the familiar path to Edie's headstone, my boots breaking through the crusted snow. The wind carried the smell of cold stone and distant wood smoke. A crow called from the oak tree we'd planted the year after she died. Bare branches now, but come spring it would bloom white. Her headstone was simple granite, the way she'd wanted. Edie Brennan, 1951-2019, beloved wife, mother, friend. I'd added one line at the bottom, something she used to say, "Love is patient." I knelt and brushed snow from the stone's face. The granite was cold even through my work gloves. I'd brought winter pansies, tough little flowers that could survive December, and a trowel to clear the frozen earth enough to plant them. "I made a mess of things after you left," I said quietly. The wind was the only answer. Got lonely, got stupid, let someone in who shouldn't have been let in. The pansies went into the half-frozen ground, slow and difficult, each one a small act of penance. Their purple and yellow faces looked defiant against the snow. "She's trying to take the farm, Edie. Your farm. The place we were going to leave to Sarah." My voice cracked. "I should have been smarter. I should have listened to Roy. I should have—" My phone rang, Sarah's number. "Dad." Her voice was tight, angry in a way I'd rarely heard. "I found something. Mom's wedding ring, the one with the 3 diamonds, the one you gave her on your 25th anniversary." "What about it?" "It's on eBay. Sold November 18th. I reverse searched the image and found the listing. Seller's name, LMB 2024, Linda Mae Brennan. Dad, she sold it 3 weeks before she filed that deed, sold it for $2,400. The cold seeped through my knees where I knelt on the frozen ground. $2,400. The ring I'd saved 6 months to buy, the ring Edie had worn every day until cancer took her, the ring I'd given to Linda in a moment of foolish hope that maybe we could build something real. She told me she lost it, I said. Back in October. Said she felt terrible about it, that it must have slipped off while she was gardening. She didn't lose it. She sold it. 3 weeks before the deed, 4 weeks before the loan. Dad, this wasn't impulse. This wasn't her falling for some guy and making a mistake. This was planned, step by step. I looked at Edie's headstone, at the pansies I just planted. Love is patient, but there's a difference between patience and stupidity, between forgiveness and letting someone steal what your wife built with you over 37 years. Can you send me that listing? Already did. Check your email. And Dad? Her voice softened. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I stayed away after you married her. I'm sorry I let my anger at you keep me from seeing what she was. I should have been there. You're here now. I'm coming home. Next week, I'll help however I can. After she hung up, I sat on the frozen ground beside Edie's grave and cried. Not for Linda, not even for myself, for the ring, for the small betrayal it represented, taking something precious that didn't belong to her, selling it like scrap metal, using the money for whatever small expenses she needed while planning to take everything else. The wind picked up, snow began to fall, light and dry. I'm going to fix this, I told Edie. I'm going to get the farm back. And Sarah's coming home. She's finally coming home. The pansies looked small and fragile against the snow, but they'd survive the winter. Come spring, they'd still be there. Roy spread the 1947 survey maps across my kitchen table that evening. The paper was brittle, yellowed with age, but Pa's careful drawings remained clear. Every boundary stone, every property line, every measurement recorded in feet and inches. The wood stove crackled. Outside, the late January thaw had started early. Snow melting in patches, revealing brown grass and mud underneath. Water dripped from the barn eaves in an irregular rhythm. Roy laid the quitclaim deed beside Pa's survey map. His reading glasses caught the lamplight as he leaned close, finger-tracing property lines. Here, he said, tapping the deed's legal description. Township 7 North, Range 4 East, commencing at the northeast corner of Section 12, thence west 1,320 feet. He moved his finger to Pa's map, but our northeast corner isn't at Section 12. It's at Section 11. The property line runs 1,306 feet, not 1,320. There's a 14-foot discrepancy. 14 feet north. This deed describes Charlie Hobson's old parcel, the land that adjoined ours. Charlie died in '98. His kids sold it to the county for that conservation easement. This deed doesn't describe our land at all. It describes property we don't even own. The coffee pot percolated on the stove. The smell of it mixed with wood smoke and the musty scent of old maps. How did they make that mistake? I asked. Online property records, Roy said. Someone who doesn't know how to read a survey properly, who just copied legal descriptions from county databases without understanding what they mean. They got close enough that it might not get caught unless someone actually surveys the boundaries. Which can't happen until spring. Which can't happen until April, earliest. Roy sat back, took off his glasses. But Walt, this is good. This proves forgery. When we can survey, when I can place stakes and show that this deed describes the wrong parcel entirely, their whole scheme collapses. The deed is worthless. The loan was secured against property they didn't own. The bank will come after them, not you. Hope flickered in my chest, small and fragile as those pansies at Edie's grave. Ground's softening early, Roy continued, looking out the window at the melting snow. If this thaw holds, we might be able to survey by late March, maybe even earlier. What do we need? Stakes. GPS unit. I can borrow one from Tom at the county surveyor's office. Pause theodolite. And a dry day with soft ground. He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. We'll prove they forged the wrong land, Walter. They stole from Charlie Hobson's ghost, not from you. Outside, the drip from the eaves quickened. Somewhere in the distance I heard the first robin of the year, early, confused by the false spring, but singing anyway. How long until we can try? I asked. Roy checked the ground moisture meter he'd brought, an old surveyor's habit, testing earth before making promises. 2 weeks if this thaw holds, month if it freezes again. He met my eyes. Either way, Walt, we're close. The truth is coming. The sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway on a Tuesday morning in early February. I watched from the kitchen window. coffee mug halfway to my lips, as Sheriff Dane climbed out with papers in his hand. The false spring had reversed. Snow falling again, temperatures dropped back below freezing. The world looked mean and gray. I met him at the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of diesel and road salt. "Walt," Dane wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've got to serve you with this. Temporary restraining order. James Hartwell filed it yesterday. Says you've been making threatening phone calls, driving past his property, harassing him and Linda." The paper felt rough in my hands. I scanned it quickly. Allegations of repeated threatening contact, menacing behavior, credible fear of violence. All lies. Every word. I haven't called him. I don't even have his number. And I sure as hell haven't driven anywhere near wherever they're staying. I know. Dane shifted his weight. Uncomfortable. Thing is, restraining orders are civil matters. Judge has to issue them based on the affidavit alone. You'll get a hearing in 2 weeks to contest it, but until then, he gestured at the paper. You can't contact them. Can't go within 500 feet of them. Violating it means jail time. After he left, I called Attorney Morrison. "False affidavit is perjury," Morrison said, and I heard the satisfaction in his voice. "If you can prove you didn't make those calls, didn't drive past their location, we can file charges. More importantly, it shows a pattern of deception. Lying under oath on a restraining order looks very bad when we're also alleging they forged documents." How do I prove a negative? Phone records, GPS data if your truck has it, witnesses to your whereabouts, and Walt? Morrison paused. They're getting desperate. People who are confident in their position don't need restraining orders. They're trying to silence you, control the narrative, make you look dangerous, which means they know something's coming. I hung up and stared at the restraining order, 500 feet, like I was the criminal, like I was the one who'd forged documents and stolen money. But Morrison was right. They were scared, and scared people made mistakes. Nora called me Thursday afternoon, her voice low and urgent. "Walt, can you come to the office? I found something big." The county records office was empty except for her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. She'd pulled 3 files, laid them across her desk like playing cards. "I couldn't stop thinking about James," she said. "The way he looked at Linda, the way he spoke. It reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place it. Then this morning I was cataloging old files and I saw his name." She opened the first file. "James Hartwell. Filed a quitclaim deed in 2019. Property transfer from Margaret Ellis to James and Margaret Hartwell. Margaret was 81, widow, no children." The second file. "James Hartwell. Filed a quitclaim deed in 2021. Property transfer from Dorothy Kemp to James Kemp Hartwell. Dorothy was 74, widow, one estranged daughter." The third file was Linda's. "Our deed, 2024. All 3 deeds filed during or shortly after hospitalization of the property owner. All 3 women were elderly or significantly older than James. All 3 deeds were later disputed by family members. The first 2 cases settled quietly. James returned the property in exchange for no criminal charges." My hands went numb. He's done this before. 3 times that I found. Could be more in other counties. Nora pulled out another document. "And look at this. James's real estate license. Suspended in 2018 for 18 months following an ethics complaint. The complaint mentioned inappropriate relationships with elderly clients and undisclosed conflicts of interest." The radiator hissed. Outside, afternoon light slanted gray through dirty windows. "I called the FBI," Nora said quietly. "White-collar crime unit. Spoke to an agent named Torres. She said they've been building a case on James for 18 months. They've been watching him, waiting for him to do it again so they could establish pattern. Walt, you're not his victim. You're his evidence. They let him do this to me so they could catch him? They didn't let him. They didn't know about you until I called. But now, they're very interested." She handed me a business card. "Agent Torres wants you to call her. She said," and I'm quoting, "We've been waiting for the victim who fights back." I looked at the 3 files. 3 elderly property owners. 3 quitclaim deeds. 3 widows who'd been lonely, vulnerable, trusting. "Linda wasn't his girlfriend," I said slowly. "She was his accomplice. She found the marks, women like her, women who'd know what widowers look like, how they behave, where they go. She'd worked at the bank. She'd seen people's financial records, known who had property worth stealing. That's what Agent Torres thinks. They call it a romance scam real estate variant." James provides the real estate expertise and false identity. Linda provides the social engineering, befriends or marries the victim, gains access to property documents, facilitates the fraud. The fluorescent lights buzzed. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. How long until they move on this? Agent Torres said they need one more piece of evidence. Physical proof the deed is fraudulent. Something definitive, not just handwriting analysis. A boundary survey, I said. A boundary survey. Outside, the February wind shook bare branches. Snow had started falling again, covering the brief thaw, burying the false promise of spring. But underneath, I knew, the ground was softening. The earth was preparing to tell its truth. 2 months, maybe less. Pastor Holcomb came by on a Saturday evening in late February, unannounced. I saw his truck lights sweep across the barn, heard his boots on the porch steps. The knock was gentle, pastoral. I let him in. The house smelled like wood smoke and the venison stew I'd left simmering on the stove. He took off his coat, accepted coffee, sat at the kitchen table where so many conversations had happened, with Edie, with Roy, with lawyers and clerks and my estranged daughter. You look tired, Walt. I am tired. The wind rattled the windows. Outside, darkness came early this time of year. 4:30 and the world was already black. The wood stove crackled, throwing shadows on the walls. I've been thinking about something, Pastor Holcomb said, warming his hands on the coffee mug. About revenge and justice, about the difference between the two. They're not the same thing. No, but they can look similar. And sometimes we convince ourselves we're pursuing justice when really we're feeding something darker. He met my eyes. Is this about the land, Walt? Or is it about Edie? The question hit like a fist to the chest. I set down my coffee cup, afraid I'd drop it. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. His voice was gentle, the way he'd been gentle when Edie died, when he'd sat with me in the hospital chapel and let me rage at God. Linda sold Edie's ring. She's living in a life you and Edie planned together. Manhattan, the city life Edie always talked about visiting someday. She took the money from land that Edie helped build, that Edie wanted Sarah to inherit. This isn't just about property fraud. This is about someone desecrating your wife's memory. My throat tightened. The stove popped. A log settling. So what if it is? Then I wonder if winning this fight will give you what you think it will. If seeing Linda and James punished will fill the hole that Edie left. He paused. I wonder if you're exhausting yourself chasing justice because you can't chase the thing you really want, which is your wife back. I stood up, walked to the window. The barn was just a dark shape against darker sky. My reflection in the glass looked old, worn, haunted. She took everything, I said quietly. Linda took Edie's ring, Edie's dream of the city, Edie's land, the future Edie wanted for Sarah. She wore Edie's coat the day she left. She sat in Edie's chair at this table and smiled while she planned to steal from me. How am I supposed to let that go? I'm not asking you to let it go. I'm asking if you've counted the cost. Pastor Holcomb joined me at the window. You've spent 3 months documenting fraud, gathering evidence, fighting legal battles. You've lost friends who believe James's lies. You've watched your reputation torn apart. You've waited through winter for ground to thaw so you can prove what you already know is true. And when this is over, when you win, because I believe you will, what then? Will the farm feel less empty? Will the house feel less lonely? Will Edie feel less gone? The wind moaned through the eaves. Water dripped somewhere, the false thaw starting again, ice melting and refreezing in an endless cycle. I don't know, I admitted. That's honest. He put his hand on my shoulder. I'm not saying don't fight. I'm saying know why you're fighting. Make sure it's for the right reasons. Because revenge, disguised as justice, will hollow you out from the inside. And you've been hollowed out enough already. After he left, I sat at the table in the dark, stovelight the only illumination. I thought about Edie, about the 37 years we'd had, about the way she'd looked at this land. Not as property, not as investment, but as home. The place where we'd raised Sarah. The place where we'd grown old together, where we'd planned to die together. Linda had never looked at it that way. She'd looked at it the way James had taught her to look at it. As a number on a spreadsheet, a transaction waiting to happen, equity to be extracted. Was Pastor Holcomb right? Was I fighting for the land or fighting against the loss of Edie? I didn't have an answer. Maybe both. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that the land was worth fighting for, not because of what it was worth in dollars, but because of what it meant. 3 generations, grandfather's backbreaking labor, father's stubborn survival through bad years, my life with Edie, built slowly, carefully, deliberately. Some things are worth defending, even if defending them costs everything, even if winning doesn't heal what's broken. The truth was worth telling, even if the truth hurt. Roy came by Sunday afternoon with news. The ground had softened enough. The false spring was holding. Temperatures in the low 40s, snow melting, earth turning from iron-hard to merely resistant. "We can survey Monday," he said, setting up his GPS unit at the kitchen table. "Ground's still cold but not frozen. We can place stakes. It won't be comfortable, but it'll be accurate." Agent Torres had called that morning too. The FBI had subpoenaed James's financial records, found the $780,000 loan disbursement, traced it to the Manhattan condo purchase. They had bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. What they needed was proof the deed itself was fraudulent. Proof that would make the entire scheme collapse, that would show clear criminal intent rather than civil dispute. "The survey is the keystone," Torres had said. "Without it, we have a messy divorce case. With it, we have federal fraud charges." I helped Roy organize the equipment. Grandfather's theodolite, cleaned and calibrated. Modern GPS unit borrowed from the county surveyor's office. Steel stakes and a sledgehammer. The 1947 field notes in their leather journal. Every page carefully protected in plastic sleeves. "We'll start at the northeast corner," Roy said, tracing the map with his finger. "That's where the discrepancy is clearest. Pa marked it with a limestone boundary stone. Carved B for Brennan, set in concrete. The deed says the corner is 14 feet north of where that stone actually sits." "What if we're wrong?" I asked. "What if somehow the deed is accurate and we missed something?" Roy looked at me over his reading glasses. "Walt, I've been a surveyor for 47 years. I learned from the man who set those original stones. I'm not wrong. The only question is whether the ground will cooperate long enough for us to prove it." Outside, the sound changed. Not the drip of melting ice, but the steady patter of rain on the tin roof. Cold rain, spring rain, the kind that soaks deep and softens earth and washes winter away. "Monday morning," Roy said. 6 a.m. We'll need good light and dry weather. If this rain stops tonight, we'll have our window." I looked out at the gray afternoon, at the rain falling steady and cold, at the barn where grandfather's tools waited, at the land that 3 generations had defended. "I'll be ready," I said. Monday morning broke clear and cold, the kind of sharp March dawn that promises nothing but delivers everything. Roy's truck pulled in at 5:45, 20 minutes before sunrise, exhaust white in the frozen air. We loaded the equipment in silence, the practiced silence of men who've worked together long enough that words would only slow things down. The theodolite case, the GPS unit, steel stakes wrapped in burlap to keep them from rattling, the sledgehammer, grandfather's field notes in a waterproof bag. Sarah's rental car was already in the driveway. She'd arrived yesterday, driven straight through from Colorado, 12 hours without stopping. Now she emerged from the house in Edie's old work coat, the canvas one with the reinforced elbows, carrying a thermos of coffee and her camera. "I'm documenting this," she'd said last night. "Every measurement, every stake, every number. When this goes to court, they'll have photographs." The 3 of us drove to the northeast corner in Roy's truck, bouncing over frozen ruts, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale gold. A robin sang from the oak tree at the property line, early, confused by the false spring, but insistent. Roy parked beside the limestone boundary stone. The carved B was exactly where grandfather had placed it in 1947, set in concrete that had held through 77 winters. Moss grew in the letter's curves. The stone was solid, immovable, true. "This is the corner," Roy said, setting up the theodolite on its tripod. The brass fittings caught the dawn light. "According to Pa's notes, this marker sits at the exact northeast corner of our property. Township 7 North, Range 4 East, Section 11. He opened the field notes. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed but legible. Grandfather's handwriting marched across the page in confident rows. Northeast corner monument, limestone 18 by 12 by 8 inches, set 24 inches deep, B, carved north face. Coordinates. Sarah photographed everything, the stone, the theodolite, the field notes. Her camera clicked steadily, professionally. She'd learned photography from Edie, I realized. The same careful framing, the same attention to light. Roy checked the GPS unit, compared the coordinates to grandfather's notes. "Perfect match. This stone is exactly where Pa said it was, hasn't moved an inch." Then he pulled out the quitclaim deed, pointed to the legal description. "But this deed says the northeast corner is here." He walked 14 feet north into what had been Charlie Hobson's old property, now county conservation land. This is where the deed claims the Brennan property begins. He drove a steel stake into the soft ground. The sledgehammer rang out across the cold morning, echoing off the distant barn. Once, twice, 3 times. The stake sank deep, marked with red surveyor's tape. That's what the forged deed describes, Roy said. A parcel that starts 14 feet north of where our property actually starts. This deed describes land that hasn't belonged to a Brennan since 1947. This deed describes Charlie Hobson's ghost. Sarah photographed both markers, the limestone with its carved B and the red-flagged steel stake 14 feet away. The camera clicked. Evidence. Roy set up the theodolite at the limestone marker, sighted along the western boundary. His movements were deliberate, ritualistic, the muscle memory of 47 years. Through the eyepiece, checking angles, making minute adjustments. Western boundary runs 1,306 feet, he said, reading from the field notes. Not 1,220 like the deed claims. 14 feet short. We walked the western line together, Roy taking measurements every 100 feet, comparing them to grandfather's notes. Every measurement matched, every angle held true. The land remembered what grandfather had taught it. At the southwest corner, another limestone marker, another carved B, another perfect match between grandfather's 1947 coordinates and modern GPS. This is what the land is worth, Linda, I said quietly, though she wasn't there to hear. My grandfather's sweat, not your forged signature. Sarah heard me. She lowered her camera, and I saw Edie's eyes looking back at me. The same green, the same fierce certainty. Mom would be proud of you, she said, for fighting for this. Roy drove the final stake at the corner the deed claimed, another 14-foot discrepancy, another red flag marking the lie. By 9 a.m., we had 8 stakes placed, 40 photographs taken, and irrefutable proof that the quitclaim deed described property the Brennans had never owned. Pa's field notes were perfect, Roy said, packing up the theodolite with the same careful reverence grandfather had taught him. Every stone exactly where he drew it in 1947. Every measurement exact. The land doesn't lie, Walt. Paper lies, people lie. But land remembers. Agent Torres arrived at my house Tuesday afternoon with another agent and a briefcase full of documents. They spread them across the kitchen table. Bank records, property records, handwriting analysis, James's prior fraud complaints. The survey is the keystone, Torres said, reviewing Sarah's photographs on her laptop. With this, everything else falls into place. The forged deed describes property you don't own. The $780,000 loan was secured against property the bank doesn't have legal claim to. That's bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy. And given James's pattern, 3 prior victims we've documented, this rises to federal racketeering. The coffee pot percolated on the stove. Outside, the March wind carried the smell of wet earth and possibility. What about Linda? I asked. Linda Brennan is cooperating, Torres said. As of this morning. The words hung in the air like smoke. What? She called our office Sunday night, said she needed to talk. We interviewed her yesterday for 6 hours. Torres pulled out a transcript. She claims James manipulated her, that she didn't understand the full scope of what they were doing, that she thought the deed transfer was legitimate estate planning. She's willing to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges. That's a lie, I said. She sold Edie's ring 3 weeks before the deed. She researched filing procedures. She planned this. I know, so does she actually, but she also knows James has done this before, that he has a pattern, that he's going to federal prison regardless, and she'd rather be a witness than a co-defendant. Torres closed the transcript. The call she made Sunday? That was 30 minutes after James told her he was leaving. Taking the condo, the money, everything. Said he'd met someone else in Manhattan, someone younger, someone more useful. Left her with the $780,000 loan debt and a forwarding address for his lawyer. The betrayer. Betrayed. Sarah laughed. Short, sharp, bitter. He used her the same way she used Dad. Exactly. Torres smiled without humor. Romance scam artists rarely stay loyal. James has a new mark. Linda is now a liability, so she's cutting a deal. My phone rang. Linda's number. Torres gestured. Answer it, she mouthed. I picked up. Linda. Walt. Her voice was small, broken. Nothing like the confident woman who'd packed designer luggage and smiled. I made a mistake. James left me. The apartment lease is in both our names, but he's gone. The loan, I can't pay it. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I have nothing. Can I come home? The kitchen was silent except for the coffee pot and the ticking radiator. Torres watched me, pin poised over her notepad. Sarah stood frozen, her mother's green eyes blazing. Through the window I could see the barn, the fields, the land grandfather had cleared with horses and determination. The land Edie and I had built a life on. The land that would go to Sarah someday, passed down clean and clear and true. You sold Edie's ring to fund a fraud, I said quietly. You forged my signature while I was unconscious in a hospital. You took 3 generations of my family's work and tried to turn it into a Manhattan condo. I know. I'm sorry. I was stupid. James said, "There's no home here," I said. "Not for you, not anymore." I hung up. Torres made a note. That's on record. Her admission about the ring, the fraud, James's manipulation, she just confirmed everything. When do you arrest him? Roy asked. Tomorrow morning. Federal marshals will pick him up at the Manhattan condo. We have enough for wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, and pattern racketeering. He's looking at 15 to 20 years. Torres packed up her documents. And Mr. Brennan, the bank is voiding the loan. The deed is being expunged from county records. As of Friday, it'll be like none of this ever happened, legally at least. After they left, the 3 of us sat in the kitchen, Roy, Sarah, and me. The afternoon light slanted golden through the window. Outside, the first green shoots pushed up through the mud, stubborn and certain. It's over, Sarah said. It's over, I agreed. But we all knew that wasn't quite true. The legal fight was over, the fraud was exposed, justice was coming. But the land would remember, and so would I. The judge's gavel came down on a Friday afternoon in late April, the sound sharp and final in the quiet courtroom. The quitclaim deed filed December 3, 2024, is hereby declared null and void due to forgery and fraudulent misrepresentation. The property known as the Brennan Homestead, 240 acres, Township 7 North, Range 4 East, is restored to sole ownership of Walter James Brennan. The defendant, Linda Mae Brennan, is ordered to repay all legal fees incurred by the plaintiff, totaling $47,320. Federal criminal charges for wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy have been filed separately and are pending trial. Attorney Morrison squeezed my shoulder. In the gallery, Roy sat with his arms crossed, satisfied. Sarah held her camera in her lap, though she hadn't photographed any of this. Some moments were for living, not documenting. Linda sat at the defendant's table, smaller somehow than I remembered. Her expensive clothes looked wrong now, costume jewelry on someone playing dress-up. She didn't look at me when the judge read the ruling, just stared at her hands, at the place where Edie's ring used to sit. James wasn't there. Federal marshals had arrested him in Manhattan 3 weeks ago. His bail hearing was next month. The prosecutors were confident, 3 prior victims willing to testify, pattern racketeering, flight risk. He'd spend the next 15 years learning that some shortcuts have very long consequences. Outside the courthouse, spring had arrived in earnest. The lilacs were blooming, their scent heavy and sweet in the afternoon air. Robins sang from every tree. The sky was that particular blue that only comes in late April, clear and infinite. Nora waited on the courthouse steps with a folder in her hands. I thought you'd want this filed today, she said, handing it to me. Can't let the weekend pass without making it official. Inside the folder was a new deed. Clean, clear, no forgeries or lies. Brennan Homestead, 240 acres, Walter James Brennan, sole owner. And beneath it, already notarized, a transfer on death deed. Upon the death of Walter James Brennan, full ownership transfers to Sarah Elizabeth Brennan. I'll file it Monday morning, Nora said. First thing, nobody's taking this land again. Thank you. The words felt insufficient for everything she'd done. The testimony, the research, the FBI call that had broken the case open. For all of it. That's what community does, she said simply. We look out for each other. We drove back to the farm in convoy. Roy's truck, Sarah's rental, my old F-150. The dirt road was dry now, dust rising behind our tires instead of mud splashing. The fields were green with new growth. The oak tree Edie and I had planted was covered in leaves, white blossoms just beginning to open. I parked by the barn and walked to the northeast corner, to the limestone marker with its carved B. The steel stake Roy had driven was still there, 14 feet north, red surveyor's tape faded but visible. Evidence of the lie. Sarah and Roy joined me. The 3 of us stood looking at the 2 markers, truth and forgery, side by side. We should pull that stake, Sarah said. Leave it, I said. Let it rust. Let the land grow over it. A reminder. Roy nodded. Your grandfather would have liked that. He believed in remembering. We walked back to the house together. Sarah had already started moving her things into her old bedroom, the one she'd left 12 years ago when she went to college, the one that had sat empty through Edie's illness and death and my foolish remarriage. Now it smelled like fresh laundry and her familiar perfume and home. I'm staying, she'd told me last week. At least through summer, maybe longer. I can work remotely. And someone needs to help you plant the garden. Edie's garden, the one we'd planned together, the one Linda had never touched. Sarah had already tilled it, already ordered heirloom tomato seeds from the catalog Edie used to mark up every January. That evening, we planted an oak sapling together where Edie's ashes were scattered, at the north boundary near Surveyor's Stone No. 1. The ground was soft and warm, easy digging. The tree was small, barely 3 feet tall, but its roots were strong. Roy held the sapling straight while Sarah and I filled in the earth around it. The smell of fresh-turned soil mixed with lilac bloom and distant wood smoke. A robin sang from the barn eaves, the same robin, maybe, that had shown up during the false spring, or maybe a different one. It didn't matter. They all sounded like hope. 3 generations defended this land, I said, patting the earth firm around the sapling's base. A 4th will grow here now. Sarah set grandfather's theodolite case beside the tree, weatherproofed and sealed. Inside were his field notes, the photographs from the survey, copies of all the legal documents, a time capsule, evidence, memory. Some roots go deeper than betrayal, Roy said. We stood there as the sun set, 3 people who'd fought for something that mattered, who'd waited through a whole winter for the earth to tell its truth. The sky turned gold, then orange, then deep purple. The first stars appeared. The air cooled, but stayed gentle, spring soft. From the road, I heard an engine, a Greyhound bus, heading east toward the interstate. Through the trees, I caught a glimpse of it, and in the window of Clara's diner as it passed, a pile of abandoned luggage. Designer luggage. To me, expensive and useless. Linda had left it there 3 days ago, according to Clara, just walked away from it, got on a bus heading west with nothing but a backpack. Going home to her sister in Oregon, Clara had heard, broke, shamed, facing misdemeanor fraud charges and a restitution order she'd never be able to pay. I didn't feel satisfaction, seeing that luggage. Didn't feel victory or vindication, just a quiet sadness for wasted time, wasted trust, wasted chances at building something real instead of stealing something false. You okay, Dad? Sarah asked. I'm okay. And I was, tired, older, scarred by the winter, but okay. We walked back to the house. The porch light was on. Through the kitchen window, I could see the table where so many conversations had happened, where grandfather's theodolite now sat as a centerpiece, where tomorrow we'd have breakfast and plan the garden and talk about normal things, weather and seeds and when to rotate the corn. The land stays, I thought. The liars leave. And every spring, the truth thaws. Inside, Roy made coffee. Sarah pulled out Edie's old recipe box, looking for the cornbread recipe. I sat at the table and opened grandfather's field notes one more time, running my finger over his careful handwriting, his precise measurements, his patient documentation of truth. Some men think justice is loud, but I'd learned what my grandfather knew. Justice is patient. It waits for spring, it waits for the ground to soften, it waits for the right moment to speak. And when it speaks in steel stakes and limestone markers and earth that remembers. The coffee smelled like home. The house felt full again, properly full, with people who belonged here. Outside, the oak sapling stood small but certain, roots digging deep into Brennan land. 3 generations before, 1 generation growing, and all of us here because we'd fought for what mattered, because we'd waited through winter, because we'd trusted that truth, like spring, always comes. I sit on the farmhouse porch most evenings now, watching the sun set over fields that have seen 3 generations of Brennan men work themselves into the earth and back out again. It's early May, the lilacs are in full bloom, their scent riding the evening breeze. Sarah's in the garden, planting the last of Edie's heirloom tomatoes. Roy's truck is in the driveway. He comes by most days now, drinks coffee, doesn't say much. Brothers don't always need words. The oak sapling by the north boundary has put out new leaves, small things, tender things, but growing. Give it 70 years and it'll shade someone else's grandchildren. That's how land works. That's how time works. You plant what you won't live to see finished. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry, if I hate Linda for what she tried to take, hate James for what he tried to steal. The answer is simpler than they expect. I'm tired of carrying that weight. Some men spend their whole lives angry at the people who wrong them. They build shrines to their grievances, tend them carefully, feed them daily. But anger is expensive. It costs more than money. It costs the part of you that could be doing something better. Justice came. The land stayed. That's enough. I learned something this winter waiting for the ground to thaw. You can't survey frozen earth, and you can't force truth before it's time. Patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's faith that spring always comes, that ice always melts, that lies eventually meet daylight. Linda wanted what the land was worth. She never understood what it cost. 3 generations, one boundary stone at a time. The land remembers. Paper lies. Steel stakes and old maps don't. And every spring, the truth thaws. Sarah calls from the garden. Dinner's ready. Roy's already heading inside. The evening light turns everything gold. I stand, brush the dust from my jeans, and follow them in. Some roots go deeper than betrayal.